What's up, everybody? Welcome to Draft Chaff. This is episode number 48. My name is Zach. I'm one of your hosts, and joining me, as per usual, Ben Fisher. What's up, dude?
I went from having drafted 0 Bellatrix Witherblooms to having drafted 2 Bellatrix Witherblooms in the span of like an hour, as we're about to get into.
Indeed, indeed. This week, we're talking all about Strixhaven live draft. This is our typical episode per set. I guess it's not something that we're talking about so much as going through, but we typically try to go through a live draft. This time it's something like less than live draft or a pseudo live draft. We pre-drafted the deck, and what we're going to do is walk through the 17 lands pool here and all the picks. We're going to go through the whole draft, but this gives us the ability to talk about it in more detail and not worry about the pick timers. So we're going to give it a shot. If you don't like it, let us know in the Discord or on the comment section on YouTube or whatever, and or on Twitter, whatever it happens to be.
We have a Discord?
You know, it's funny you should mention that because that's actually the first bit of housekeeping we have coming up. That's right, we do have a Discord. It's completely free and open to everybody, so jump into that. It's a great place to go to talk to us and the rest of our community there. Everything draft related, everything Magic related, essentially. We've got a bunch of constructed channels open as well, and it's a great place to be, so check that out. The link to that's in the episode description as well as on the Twitter page. And of course, the show is brought to you by you, the listener, via Patreon. You can check that out at patreon.com/draftchaffpod if you haven't already. That is the best place to go to support us directly. It's basically our only sponsor for the show, and we have, I think, 5 different tiers over there, starting at $2 going up to $10, and is a huge help to us. Even just that $2 amount is huge. You can get things like stickers, access to the full show notes, custom deck building opportunities with us, access to completely uncut and unedited versions of the show with pre and post show nonsense, and a handful of other things. Now that we met our first Patreon goal, of course, the show is now available on YouTube, and you can check out the link to that in the episode description as well if you are listening to this and want to see those videos. All right, Ben. We are going to skip our Cracker Draft type thing this week, but because we're doing a 17 lands draft and Arena likes to be a little bipolar about whether or not we can see pack one, pick ones, we're going to go through the pack one, pick one here as our Cracker Draft type thing. So I guess we'll save that for when we get into the draft. So We'll go right into our Teferi Tybalts here. If you're new to the show, Teferi Tybalt is the section of the show where Ben and I talk about something good, something bad that happened in the last week, and just kind of give you a little insight into what's going on in our lives. So Ben, why don't you kick us off with your Teferi Tybalt?
Sure. I'm going to start with my Tybalt. On the downside of things, it is getting close to the end of the high school year, which means that my classes have all been kind of losing their minds. I went outside for one of my classes today, did a physics experiment outside with them. They seem to enjoy that, going outside into the outdoors for once. And a lot of them are just getting restless. So keeping my classes, restrained for the last month or so of the school year is going to be tough. But any of those teachers that I know listen to this podcast, let me know if you've got advice on things to do during the last month of the school year that will prevent your seniors from falling asleep in class.
Nice.
My Teferi for the week, a bunch of bands that I like released new music, which is always exciting. So a few of those that I happen to like, Cavetown, Boy Pablo, Doty, all released albums or EPs. Bleachers, run by Jack Antonoff, who you may know. He's the producer for pretty much every good pop musician. He does everything that Taylor Swift does, Lorde, but he also has his band Bleachers, and he's actually a New Jersey local. So he writes a lot about New Jersey in his songs. So as a fellow New Jerseyans, we have to support him. And his new single is out, and it's like a summer jam. It's very uplifting, pretty great stuff. Also, a new J. Cole album came out, which is pretty good. There's some hot tracks on there.
I'll pretend that I know any of the people that you just mentioned, and we'll continue on with the show.
Fair enough. If you're a fan of any of those bands, let me know in the Discord.
So for me, we'll start with my Teferi. There's a lot of really cool stuff in the pipeline here for the Draft Chaff podcast. I'm very excited for everybody to get to see it all. keep an eye and an ear out for any updates coming in the next month or so.
Our founders can yeah, they know what's up.
They do. Also, I'm going to take this section just quickly to mention, if you are currently a patron, keep an eye out on your inbox, because we're going to be sending a poll out for some things coming up in the near future. We want to get your opinions as our biggest supporters, so definitely keep an eye out on your inbox for that. My Tybalt this week is that my hands have been hurting really badly, and I think it's probably related to just my extended periods of time using keyboards and mice and like not really stretching very well. And I also fidget with my ring quite a bit, and I think the way that like my hand, you know, is like curved like that when I play with my ring, and I think that's putting extra strain on my hands. I don't know, but they hurt really bad. I hope it's not carpal tunnel yet, because I fully expect to get that at some point in my life, but I hope I'm not getting it now.
Just not yet.
Yeah, so we'll see. I don't know. This has happened like in the past, like a few months ago, so maybe it's just something that I'm gonna have to expect to come and go, but I'm hoping it's not anything terribly permanent.
Yeah, hopefully. You know, I actually thought I had carpal tunnel when we were in high school for a little bit.
Oh yeah?
When I was playing mallets in the band, because that's just literally just wrist movement. That's it. And then I was also like drumming and playing piano a lot more in my free time, which those that are watching on YouTube can see my beautiful keyboard behind me. I love this thing. But I don't get as much of a chance to play it. So I think I've decreased in likelihood to get carpal tunnel, but I guess it's zero sum between us. So enjoy the carpal tunnel.
Thanks, man. Much appreciated. With that, on to our listener question of the week. This week, we've got a question from Batwheels. Batwheels asks, we know what your favorite cards or type of cards are. We've talked about it a lot on the show. What is your least favorite card, or the card that you love to hate?
Ooh, fantastic question, Batwheels. Oh, man.
Yeah, so we spent some time talking about this before the show. Typically, we answer these like kind of live off the cuff, but this is a question that required some forethought. And I had a hard time coming up with any answers to this. I feel like I don't really hate any cards, like even cards that are like just generally bad cards, or cards that were stupid when they were printed, or cards that I like in a vacuum. Like, you know, one of the first ones that came to mind was Uro. And Uro was terrible in the environment it was printed in, but I love the card. Like, I think it's a cool card, and I mean, it does the blue-green thing, so I guess it's a little stale at this point. Like, yes, we get it. It draws cards and it ramps and whatever. But I still like the card. I don't hate it. I just hate the environment that it was in, or what it was doing in that environment. Same could be said for Oko. Like, I kind of hate that, but at the same time, I really like the card. Like, I like powerful stuff like that, and it's also in my colors, so I'm cool with it for the most part. I don't really like the whole like extended stuff that they like straight printed into Legacy, like the Walking Dead stuff, and I think we're getting Lord of the Rings, or is that like a meme? Were people joking about that?
It's honestly kind of hard to say at this point. I don't think that's confirmed, but we're getting a D&D set. Anything could happen.
Well, at least D&D is a property owned by Wizards of the Coast, who also owns Magic. So that kind of makes sense to me, and they fit together well. We already kind of... Yeah. Well, I mean, not really, but it could be. Like, Forgotten Realms could just be a plane within Magic's multiverse. Who knows?
Dude, what if it is? What if Jace shows up and he's got like a like one of those like dumb like old timey D&D wizard top hats, you know?
I think that would anger literally everybody. But if anybody's going to show up on a plane, I think if anybody's going to show up on a plane and change his outfit to fit with the plane very well, it's going to be Jace. We've seen him as a pirate. We've seen him in a duster on Innistrad. You know, he wears his normal thingy on pretty much everywhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, true.
So anyway, I don't know where I was going with that. I liked the I didn't actually like the Godzilla stuff they were doing, but I like the way they handled that far better than just printing new cards into Legacy and all those other formats, because that was a cool way to tie them in without actually affecting what the card does, or like making it part of the game, really. Yeah, like, I don't know. It's a little weird. I don't think I like that. I also feel like I'm obligated to say that I hate anything that can't be countered, given that counterspell's probably like, it's not actually my favorite card, but it's up there in the top 10 for sure. So yeah, those are the cards that I would say are my least favorite.
You got me thinking. I don't remember what the cards do, so I don't think these cases will be applicable. But you got me thinking, like, what if someone is doing like a pithing needle or a ruined halo or a Gideon's intervention, one of those effects where you have to name a card, right?
Sure.
And then that name card can't be played or doesn't deal damage or whatever. And you have to name like Glenn or
Yeah,
like
it's like what
Rick,
the heck?
like one of the Walking Dead dudes. It's like, come on, like what? Now I have to be involved in it too. Like keep that to yourself.
You're breaking my
Um,
immersion.
yeah, right. I want to be a wizard. Not a, I don't know, whatever they are, zombie hunters. I haven't actually watched Walking Dead. I'm sure it's great.
The first few seasons are
And
good.
a lot of people seem to really like it. I know there's a kid named Carl, I think. I don't know. Um, I was thinking about this question and I was trying to think of cards that, so cards that I never like on the battlefield, either on my side or the opponent's side. There's some cards that I hate seeing on my opponent's side. Shark Typhoon is an example of that. I cannot stand playing against Shark Typhoon, but I also like playing Shark Typhoon. So it balances out. I'm willing to accept that Shark Typhoon is like, it should be legal. Um, there are some cards, however, that I would never cast and that I also hate seeing on my opponent's side of the battlefield. Um, Let me just run you through a few of these. The top one that came to my mind for that is Soaring Thought Thief, which
Interesting.
obviously doesn't bode well for my standard career.
Yeah,
um,
not so much.
yeah, because I refuse to play it and I hate playing against it. It's just they just always have it. It's just so good. It's a really well designed card. I got to admit it. It single handedly makes the rogues deck tick, but I just hate it. Can't stand it. And then kind of descending in order on that list, Extinction Event. I can't stand that card. I don't think it's good. Like it's too situational. I get it that it exiles, but like I'll be playing White Weenie in Historic, and my opponent, I'll be like hoping they have Extinction Event because they're just dead no matter what if they have the Extinction Event. It's not that hard to play cards that have different CMCs.
Yeah, I don't
Sorry,
know. I
Matt.
mean, the alternative though is like an expensive board wipe. I mean, I guess you could see Damnation or Wrath of God as like, 4 mana
Yeah.
board wipe, but that's yeah, I don't know.
Just like play Languish. It's just always gonna, like, when is I don't know. I guess against like specifically Heliod or Lovestruck Beast, any of the 3 mana 5 toughness dudes, but there's not even that many of them, and those are very niche. If you can't deal with those in your black deck, then I don't know, you have bigger problems. Anyway, okay, that's my Extinction Event soapbox. Let me climb back down and keep going. Time Walk effects. I don't like Time Walks very much. I'll play them occasionally in like a very niche deck, but I just nothing. I just don't think they feel very good to play.
Does that include like
Teferi,
Mindslaver effects?
Mindslaver requires a bit more finesse, so
Okay,
I'm okay with Mindslaver slash Emrakul, like that kind of thing.
sure.
I'll go with Teferi Time Raveler. I did play that one a little bit when it was in standard, and I mean that obviously didn't last very long. But I played like the 4-color pile when people were just playing like, what was there, like an adventures deck that had that in it? No, that wasn't the right
I
time
don't
frame,
think
was
so.
it? What was the 4-color Teferi deck that was going around? I don't remember
I
what
don't
it was,
remember.
but
I was probably
it was
playing
dumb.
limited.
That's fair. And then last but not least, Shell Shield. I was trying to think of cards that just like I never like playing and I never like seeing on my opponent's side. Just Shell Shield from Zendikar Rising. Just don't like it. They always have it. It always blows you out. They always have like the thing with kicker bonus, and they always have the Shell Shield. That's probably the most recent card in a set that's done this. More recently in Ikoria, Sudden Spinnerets. Just like, except that one I actually like playing with a lot. I know you didn't play much Ikoria. It's 1 green for an instant. Target creature gets +1/+3 until end of turn. It gets a reach counter and you untap it, which is just great
Yeah,
for
sounds
1
awesome.
green. That's another one that they just always have, but I'll admit I like playing with that one.
All right, let's get on to this live draft here. So we're gonna walk through the whole draft starting with our pack one pick one here. So pack one pick one, we have. I'm just gonna name cards that are in the running for the pick. We're not gonna go through every card. I think it's far enough along in the format for us to not have to read every single card here. So cards that are looking interesting here are we have Flame Scroll Celebrant as our rare. There's an Eliminate in the pack. Karok Wrangler, Quandrix Pledge Mage, and an Introduction to Annihilation, but I think that's pretty much where we're at for pack one pick one.
Yeah.
Type effects.
Oh, our lesson is Containment Breach.
Yes. Well, we also opened the Introduction to Annihilation, but yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah, sorry. The uncommon, we got an uncommon lesson as well. That's Containment Breach. There's other stuff like Zach mentioned. Grinning Ignis, Cogric Archivist, Moldering Karok. These are not interesting. So, Flame Skull Celebrant, Eliminate. That's kind of all I'm interested in here.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I've not really been super fond of the Flame Scroll Celebrant, even in like decent Lorehold decks and such. It just isn't a card that I've been that excited about. So I think I'm just on Eliminate.
Yep, the pump effect is real. We took the Eliminate pretty clean here. By the way, we should mention we did this draft after we did a second, so we did one draft, and we were like, this was okay, but it didn't feel very interesting to talk about. We did another draft, which is this one, and we did it literally right before the podcast. So like Zach mentioned earlier, we thought sometimes when we do the live draft, it just feels a little bit rushed, you know? Sometimes we may make a weird pick or something like that because we're trying to get all of our thoughts out and we don't have time. So we thought we could try this, and like he also mentioned, we want your feedback on if this actually works or not. But I mean, we have 17 lands, we have the technology, may as well use it, right?
Yeah, so on to pack one, pick two. We see a Daemogoth Woe Eater, Devouring Tendrils, and an Elemental Summoning are basically what we're looking at as far as power level picks. There's a Pop Quiz, Serpentine Curve, Tome Shredder, but yeah, I think you know, when we were going through this, the Devouring Tendrils is what really caught our eye, but we were between kind of Daemogoth Woe Eater and the Devouring Tendrils, I think, at this point.
Mm-hmm. Funnily enough, I didn't see the tendrils at first, and I was like, "Ooh, a Woe Eater, perfect for after our Eliminate." And Zach was like, "Dude, what are you looking at? Like, there's another good 2-drop removal spell here." Yeah, we took the tendrils.
Yeah, I mean, the Woe Eater, you know, maybe wheel. It's early enough that I don't think it's correct to stick to, you know, a specific college yet. You could take the summoning and just keep it in the lesson plan and hope to that, you know, that'll help you keep open as well. But Devouring Tendrils is powerful enough that I think that was the correct pick there. So pack one, pick three, we ended up doing a little bit of a pivot here, and this is kind of an interesting pick because we have a Cultivate, a Professor of Symbology, and a Pest Summoning, and a Quandrix Pledge Mage, as well as a Witherbloom Pledge Mage, I think are the only reasonable cards here. We looked at the Professor Symbology and thought, you know, maybe this is a signal, a pick three Professor here, because it's one of the best white cards. It's up there as probably the best learn card in the format. You never really see these come back around, ever. I don't think I've ever seen one wheel. And so we started to speculate, maybe this means white's open?
Yeah, this says that, I mean, they're either too fantastic, better than this cards, or the people to our right might not be that interested in the Professor of Symbology. There's also a Guiding Voice in this pack, so, you know, 2 good white cards. There is actually a third white card in this pack. It's a white card. It's an uncommon. It says you draw 3 cards on it. There's some other text on there. I don't know why we didn't take it. What were we thinking?
Right. So we did end up taking the Professor Symbology here, speculating that, you know, maybe white is open with the Guiding Voice in the pack and a Professor Symbology as well. Perhaps that was a signal. So that's where we were leaning here. Otherwise, I think we probably would have been on like Pest Summoning or the Pledge Mage. We talked about Cultivate a little bit, but I think the other two are probably just where you would rather be at this point in the draft.
Oh, we should mention, these files will be available for you to look through as well. So if you want to follow along with the 17 lands files, probably should have said that at the beginning. Oh, well, you're 4 packs in. We're basically at the beginning still. If you want to follow along with this as we're talking through it, you can, to see like the full packs, because we're kind of not saying every single card. You can access those in what, the show notes?
Yeah, you can catch that in the episode description.
So in pick 4 here, we actually have a rare lesson in this pack. It's Confront the Past, the kind of Planeswalker targeted removal spell. There's a Fracture, there's a Tenure to Inkcaster, there's a Lash of Malice, Eureka Moment, but Combat Professor is what stuck out to us here. So we just slammed our Draft Chaff hero. So pretty good follow-up to that is the Combat Professor. I like that this pairs really well with I guess the other Professor of Symbology. The professors play well together. Combat Professor can pump the Professor of Symbology. A 2-1 body on the ground is not impressive, but attacking with 3 power, that's a little more what I'm looking to do.
Yeah, and notably, if you're looking at the black and green side of things, because our other cards were Devouring Tendrils and Eliminate before we picked up the Professor of Symbology. Confront the Past is a fine card, but I don't really take it highly, even with the fact that it's a lesson. Inkcaster, there's a Tenured Inkcaster in the pack as well, which maybe could have made the cut. And there's a Lash of Malice in black as well, but those are the only black cards. And then from a green perspective, we really only have Eureka Moment. That's like the only green card in the pack. So I think Combat Professor was another section here where we're looking at this and seeing, okay, we got past 2 really solid white cards in a row. There aren't any other white cards in the pack, so that could mean that the person to our right is drafting white and just happen to have better white cards that they were taking. But, we thought it was a good enough speculation pick, especially given that we aren't giving up a ton to take it. So on to pick 5 here, we see a Plumb the Forbidden. There's an Introduction of Prophecy, a couple of campuses, that being Prismari and Witherbloom, and then nothing else, a Professor of Zoomancy and an Unwilling Ingredient, which was what we ended up taking here. In blue, there's an Arcane Subtraction, which I think is a decent pickup, but obviously we're not in blue, so we would have been looking between black, green, or white here still, and Eager First Years are the only white card in the pack, so again, maybe somebody to our right's drafting white. It's not one that we are going to see as a signal here, but both Professor of Zoomancy and Unwilling Ingredient seem decent, and then there's a Plumb the Forbidden, but I think it's a little early to really go in on that, so we ended up taking the Unwilling Ingredient here.
Mm-hmm. If I may bust out a little bit of vector theory, for the first 5-6 picks or so, you really want to be figuring out your direction of your deck's vector, and then trying to get it as long as possible in that direction. You do have to consider some expected value picks at some point. That's why, for example, we kind of abandoned green here and we took that, I guess, kind of risky Combat Professor, given that there were no other white cards in the pack minus some junkers. So taking the Combat Professor is a strong vector in the white aggro, direction, if you will, and that pairs well with Eliminate. This could be a powerful Silver Quill aggro deck, which is what we were considering with this pick here, with the Unwilling Ingredient. Turns out a 1/1 Menace is sometimes just what those Silver Quill decks want, and that adds a better vector to our current potential deck than any of these other ones do. For example, it's not the best card in the pack. The best card in this pack, I don't know. It's kind of rough. Arcane Subtraction, Professor of Zoomancy, maybe. Introduction of Prophecy is up there too. But I think this one goes the most strongly in our direction that we're kind of angling towards, with Professor of Symbology being a very aggressive card as well.
Indeed. So on to pick 6, we see a Deadly Brew. Divine Gambit is in the pack, but we also see Expel and Expanded Anatomy, and we kind of just snapped the Expanded Anatomy here. That's now we've got the 2 Draft Chaff hero mentions together, and you really can't go wrong, especially when we're looking at this sort of black-white aggro deck that Ben was just talking about. Expanded Anatomy slots into that perfectly, and we're going to be looking to take more learn cards to make sure we can actually cast that.
Look, we mentioned in our Draft Chaff hero episode that you don't always want to just go Symbology, Expanded Anatomy, cast it on Symbology, swing for 4. It's not always the best line, but it is a line sometimes. If your opponent misses a land drop, then I'm trying to kill him.
Yeah, and Expanded Anatomy is not terrible on the Unwilling Ingredient either. It sort of forces some awkward blocks from your opponent, and then you can catch in the Unwilling Ingredient anyway. So,
yep. Next in pick 7, we've got a Start from Scratch, a Beaming Defiance, Pillar Drop Rescuer, Spirit Summoning, Promising Dusk Mage, and the pick that we took from this, Owlin Shield Mage. So when I look at this pack, the first thing I notice is that there's not a single blue card in here.
True.
And the green cards are not ones that I'd ever want to, put in a Magic the Gathering limited deck. There's a Tangle Trap. There's a Spined Karok. These cards are bad. And I'm looking at Owlin Shield Mage here. I mean, this is looking like it could be some kind of slightly evasive black-white deck. Maybe not as aggressive as the, 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, like Pump Spell kill you. But kind of like the Skies, the evasion-y black-white deck with the Owlin Shield Mage, the Unwilling Ingredient with Menace, the Combat Professor with Flying, and then, leveraging your expanded anatomy to create awkward blocking scenarios for your opponents. It's kind of this decision ripe aggro deck, which I really like playing. I find those to be a lot of fun to play in limited. So we took the Owlin Shield Mage here. The Spirit Summoning is also an option. It's the worst summoning, but the ability to get it off of Professor of Symbology if you don't have a 3-drop, it just fits in the slot. So kind of hoping to wheel that, but not super likely.
On to pick 8. We're past a Shadewing Laureate, so it does look. I mean, Shadewing Laureate's not really the most impressive Silverquill card, but it's a little bit of a signal saying people aren't interested in taking some of these Silverquill cards. There's a Village Rites and a Leech Fanatic in the pack as well, but we also see 0 blue cards. There is a Prismari Campus, which maybe means something, but doesn't mean a whole lot. 0 green cards. So it's starting to look like our swap, our little pivot there, even though it was super early. I don't know that I would necessarily call it a pivot, but our read on the white cards seems to have been correct. We'll see where the rest of this draft goes, but coming back into basically the end of pack 1 here, as far as new cards are concerned, we're scooping up that Shadewing Laureate.
Yep, pairs well with some of other stuff. I like this direction, excuse me, that Silverquill can take, where it kind of relies on its flyers. This deck can be weak to early removal. You really need to get in some damage early to actually make your Owlin Shield Mage good. Owlin Shield Mage is not a good blocker. Your 3/3 flying ward, pay 3 life. You don't want this to be having to jump in front of 2/2s that end up just getting pumped by the infinite strong combat tricks in this set, right? So Shadewing Laureate, not the best attacker of all time, but it does kind of fit the direction of flyers and evasive threats that are awkward to kill, because then you end up getting value from her.
Absolutely. So we'll kind of round through the rest of this pack here. Next up, we picked up an Arrogant Poet. There really wasn't anything else in the pack. An Exhilarating Elocution, but nothing else that our deck was really interested in taking here. In pick 10... go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that that was the pack that we opened. The Containment Breach came back, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah,
I take this. I find this one pretty useful to. I mean, the number of Poets Quills that I've blown up with Containment Breach. I mean, I like having it. I think there's definitely green drafters at this table. I don't know. Maybe I take it with probably higher than other people do. I don't know. I love having a wish board. I love having flexibility.
So on to pick 10, we did wheel the Expel, so we scooped that up here. Other cards in the pack still are Leech Fanatic, Tome Shredder, Lorehold Campus, just a couple that we're looking at. There is a Moldering Karok in the pack, but not the highest value Witherbloom card, so we scoop up the Expel. Into pick 11, we did scoop up Lorehold Campus here, so...
But you know what else came back? The white card that says draw 3 cards on it. Why didn't we take it here? Is there a downside to this card that I'm not reading?
Well, by your philosophy of kill your opponent before they can cast their cards, I guess not.
Okay, for this same reason that I love, what was the wizard, the Farsight Adept? I loved Farsight Adept so much. I would play as many of them as I could get in some of my decks. Secret Rendezvous is not Farsight Adept.
Yeah.
This does not work in the same way. This does not add a body to the board. This, I mean, it even costs double white. So you can't even. No way. It's bad. I remember when I saw Mark Rosewater's little blog thing when he says he teases the stuff in the upcoming set. He was like, "There's gonna be a white card that says you draw 3 cards on it." Oh man, I wonder what the downside's gonna be. It turns out it was just the absolute worst downside possible.
All right, rounding out this pack, we did pick up a Fracture here in pick 12, and then an Eager First Year at pick 13. And then we just kind of scooped up a couple of things. We did get a pick 15 Pillar Drop Rescuer, which was, again, a little bit of a signal because that card should be going a little earlier than that. Maybe we're the only white drafter at the table, but even, we didn't see the Spirit Summoning or the Beaming Defiance come back, so, there definitely is another white drafter. We just, I guess the packs broke such that Pillar Drop Rescuer wasn't high on their list, but I think it's probably us and one other drafter are looking at white cards here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a flyer, which pairs well with the other stuff we've got going on. We've picked up a few cards that trade off early. Maybe that Eager First Year. The Professor of Symbology is a great one to get back with this. And even if maybe our like Shadewing Laureate happens to die, we can grab it back too. I mean, this format can be slow enough that the Pillar Drop Rescuer, it's basically like a Bruna the Fading Light. It just kind of comes in, reanimates a huge thing out of your graveyard.
Okay, sure.
Because if you get the Professor of Symbology back, then you can go and get another expanded anatomy, and then it's kind of like you're getting Brizella Voice of Nightmares off of this. That's what it feels like when you play it, at least.
Sure, that has not been my experience, but sure.
Oh God, we have to talk about Pack 2, Pick 1, don't we?
So on to Pack 2, Pick 1. Here
you can tell them. You can tell them.
Here we see a couple of campuses. There's a Prismari campus, Silverquill campus. There's also a Mage Duel, Pilgrim of the Ages, Spectre of the Fens, a Quandrix Cultivator, which is, pretty decent Quandrix card. There's also an Aether Helix, but our rare, and by rare, else? I mean mythic rare, Beledros Witherbloom.
Man.
Beledros has been a phenomenal card in this format. I have very much liked it. However, we aren't quite in Witherbloom at the moment. Now, here's where I was looking at with this pack. Because I'll spoil it for you right now. I convinced Ben to take the Witherbloom. Yes, I convinced Ben to take a Beledros Witherbloom.
Oh my God.
And now that's on record.
I'm never going to live this down.
So,
never going to live it down.
Here's the thing. As far as white cards go, we're looking at Pilgrim of the Ages and Spirit Summoning. Not cards that are generally taken super highly, and we know that we are likely one of two white drafters at the table. We might not wheel a Pilgrim, but it really isn't doing a ton for our deck. We don't necessarily care about a 3-mana 2/1 in an aggro deck. Just not something we're super interested in. Of course, we're not interested in Witherbloom in an aggro deck. However, I think the potential ceiling and potential floor of the Witherbloom are higher than both the Pilgrim of the Ages. The other options we have here are Spectre of the Fens, which is also not a card that's incredibly useful in an aggro deck. That is it. Those are our only other options unless we're dipping into green in a different way or taking a campus. So, my thought is that Beledros Witherbloom is a fine upside, fine end game, fine top end for a deck that ends up not necessarily being aggro. And my thought was that we could leverage a lot of these flyers we have: Combat Professor, Allen Shield Mage, Pillar Drop Rescuer, Shadewing Laureate, and then Beledros Witherbloom, and convert to something of a fast start mid-range deck that uses Witherbloom on the top end to actually just kill in the air. But I had to convince Ben of this. This was not an easy thing to get him to take this pick.
I'll admit, when you called the Obzon Flyers, I was a little more convinced. But, okay, this pick spits in the face of Vector Theory. But I guess if we tried to justify it, the reasoning would have to be that the vector of Beledros Witherbloom is so strong that it justifies inclusion in a deck that is aiming in a different direction. Now, because vectors have length and direction, when you add two vectors that are pointing in opposite directions, they cancel out. They work against each other. And I can think of a pretty tangible way that Beledros Witherbloom would act against this deck's game plan. Imagine you have a starting hand, and it's like 3 lands, say a Professor of Symbology, a Shadewing Laureate, a Combat Trick, and Beledros Witherbloom. And you're like, okay, I have a 6-card starting hand, but I guess I'm just going to be okay with it.
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't you just rather that be a land or like anything else?
I guess anything else, but if it's a land in an aggro deck, you probably don't want that either.
Okay, you know what I mean.
My main thought was that the general weakness of these decks, because this is a format that tends to go long so frequently, it's not like, oh, I hope the game doesn't go long. They're gonna go long. Even aggro decks, unless you can kill super reliably on turn 5 or 6 or something, the games go long. And even 5 or 6 is generally pretty late for an aggro deck. So if they're going to go long, if that's a given, you know that to be something that's going to happen. And our deck is not the most aggressive thing in the world right now. It's leaning towards aggression, and it is certainly going to be able to do that. But it's not the most aggressive. I still think that the upside of Beladros was higher than anything else in this pack. And that's the biggest part here, is that we're not giving anything up to take it. If there was if there was another combat professor or something, it would have just scooped up the combat professor. But there isn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, spirit summoning, I think, would have been the next pick here. And the 2-3 or 1-2 punch of like Professor Symbology on 2, spirit summoning on 3. That's real. Like, that's drawing you a card, getting you a thing in, but
we were past the spirit summoning last pack. So there's a chance this
true.
wheels or we see another one. We're never going to see Witherbloom again, and like we don't have to play it. Is the other thing. Like, you just take the card.
Yeah. I suppose like an aggressive Lorehold deck would probably still play Velomachus, right? If it had like, assuming
if it had
it
enough
like,
instants of sorceries, yeah.
Yeah,
I have.
I mean,
I actually played a Lorehold deck that was relatively aggressive and played Velomachus because it just won games. Like, all you had to do is top deck an Enthusiastic Study off of the Velomachus, and you're off to the races.
I mean, this is worse than Velomachus, though, right?
Probably. Because
Beladros then wants the game to keep going. This isn't like a 7-mana card that says the game is ending right now on turn 7. This is saying, well, I'm going to continue to get you incremental value, and I'm a 4/4 flyer, so I guess you can attack with me. But
yeah, in a lot of games, Beladros is going to be a 7-mana 4/4 flyer in this deck. Like, the pests generally don't do a whole lot, but against the few decks where you're board stalling and you just can't attack into anything, having the extra flyer is going to be beneficial, and then also having the pests come up the board at that point. That's kind of what I was looking at, is that this will pivot your game plan if the game goes long. And it's only a card, it's only one pick that you're not actually giving up much to take. So, again, doesn't necessarily make the cut, but I still think it was the best pick here.
Fair enough. Like, comment, and subscribe if you think
Beladros Witherbloom. It's been so long since you did that.
I was waiting to pull it out.
All right, on to pack 2, pick 2.
No. For those that haven't known, I gotta talk about this. It's a running bit since the early days of the show. Like, I definitely said it in like episode 1, right?
Yes, you did.
I said something along the lines of like, comment, and subscribe if you blah 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 blah. So I haven't said it in a while. Those that are newer listeners might not have heard it, but maybe I'll bring it back every once in a while just to see if Zach will edit it out or not. If you never hear this, then that's why.
All right, pack 2, pick 2. We got past the dramatic finale, so hey, we read the cards right. I guess we cut white black enough, going the opposite direction that we got one of the best cards in the deck. That said, we also see a Mage Hunter's Onslaught and a Rise of Exodus in this pack, and there's also Pest Summoning, which we don't really care about, but it's worth noting that it's there. Show of Confidence? I don't know. I mean, Dramatic Finale is just like a Windmill Slam here, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. The one case where Dramatic Finale is bad is when you can't cast it on turn 4. If you're playing some kind of 3-color deck. Like, let's say I made some, like, huge brain, just absolutely absurd splash, say for green. I don't know what you'd ever want to splash in a deck like this, including for green. But and you happen to have a forest on turn 1, then you can't actually cast Dramatic Finale in turn 5. So that wouldn't work out very well. But there'd never be a situation like that, right?
I can't think of any. All right, on to pick 3.
Again, in pick 3, we kind of just got set up here. We read the cards in pack 1, and I don't know, this is why I like multicolor sets. You get paid off when you draft properly. We picked up a channel to channel out Beladros Witherbloom. I'm kidding. We picked up a closing statement, but channel is in this pack.
Yes, there's a channel, there's a closing statement, there's a Witherbloom Campus, another Pest Summoning, and a Beaming Defiance. A Lorehold Pledge Mage would have been on the radar as well, but, closing statement is just fantastic removal. It does the counters thing that you care about in this deck, and it's even pretty cheap at that when you use it correctly, so, pretty much Windmill Slammed that one as well. Pick 4 here, we saw an Environmental Sciences, which is a card that, if we are considering the Witherbloom splash, perhaps, you definitely want to scoop up. There's a Study Break and a Guiding Voice as well, so some learn cards that we could get here, but we ended up settling on Reflective Golem. And again, leaning into that, this is another situation where I think, we took the Witherbloom, but still not letting that define the draft for us. I think if we were really leaning into the Witherbloom thing, you would have scooped up Environmental Sciences here. But we are still trying to play this deck's strengths. We are trying to strengthen the vector of this deck in the best direction it can go in. And like Ben mentioned, Witherbloom at this point kind of pulls the deck into a completely different direction, and by doing so just kind of shrinks the overall vector. So we're leaning into the aggression plan with Witherbloom as a backup potentially to make the cut if we don't end up in an aggressive deck. And in this case, we took Reflective Golem to try to further that aggression vector.
Mm-hmm. I'll be honest, I think this is the first pick that I regret. And don't interpret that to mean that I don't regret the Witherbloom pick. That don't worry about that. I think Guiding Voice may have actually been the pick here over the Reflective Golem, just on the fact that we don't have a single pump spell that pairs well with the Golem yet. We have the Expanded Anatomy, so I guess that kind of counts. But I think I would have rather, in hindsight, taken the Guiding Voice over the Golem. It's possible the Golem wheels. It's possible that no other deck is interested in copying instants and sorceries. And, maybe if there's a Lorehold drafter here, they would take the Study Break, or there's a Faithless Looting in this pack, or a Fury Calm Snarl, or even Environmental Sciences. I think the Golem could have potentially come back around, and I think the pick probably was Guiding Voice here. I don't know. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, so, I mean, I have the benefit of hindsight here, and we know what happens with the rest of this draft. I think it's tough. I think any deck that's going to take the Guiding Voice would also have taken the Reflective Golem. I don't know which order those would be picked in any deck. Like, if you just said you're in a deck that can play these two cards, which of the two are you taking? I think there's still too much missing information, so I'm not sure what other drafters would take here when they're not in our seat. But I think taking the Golem it's easier to build around taking the Golem here than hope the Golem wheels and then have less targets for your Guiding Voice. I mean, the Guiding Voice is going to be good either way, so maybe that was still just the pick. But I like picking up one Golem in these decks that really want to have all these combat tricks and such.
Yeah, I guess you could say the Golem changes the angle of our direction by a hair, right? It goes in a slightly different direction and adds like a good amount. Because when Golem goes off, it's nuts. You can do some really wacky stuff. I've seen like turn 5-6 kills with Golem easy. But then again, Guiding Voice I think would have stayed more in our direction. Maybe not have added as much strength, but yeah, I don't know. Like we said, we know how the draft ends, so hard to say for sure. But this I think I regret. So next up, though, we got another interesting pick. This is pack 2, pick 5. We got past an Academic Probation. That's the rare lesson, the white one. There's also a Defiant Strike. And then, honestly, that's it. There's like a Spiteful Squad, but I'm not very high on Spiteful Squad, even in these kind of decks. There's Campus Guide, Reject, Spine Karok, Grinning Ignis. What do you think of Zephyr Boots? I played this in my very first deck of the format, and I trophied with it. And I was like, wow, this card must be great. That's probably not the right way to analyze this, though.
Yeah, it sounds a little results-oriented. But I do actually like the card. I think it's pretty solid. I think in a deck where you're trying to benefit from as many flyers as possible, I think it's pretty good. Also, equipping creatures is a good reason for people to, it kind of adds a little additional oomph for them to point their removal spells at those. And when you have a dramatic finale, that's something you want to think about. We ended up taking the Defiant Strike here because it pairs well with the Golem we just scooped up. And so when you have a 1-mana card that's pumping your team and drawing you 2 cards, you're like, yeah, okay, that seems pretty solid. But I could totally see an argument for taking the Zephyr Boots here. I think it's a phenomenal card, and it does provide a little bit of card advantage that you don't otherwise have in this deck.
Yeah, I will say Zephyr Boots is a little bit of a nombo, given that I think over half of our creatures at this point already have flying.
Very true. Very true.
I think Academic Probation is also a reasonable pick here. When you learn for Probation, you usually win the game that turn. This card looks bad. It's the one that says, like, choose a non-land card name. Your opponent can't cast spells with that name. Or choose a non-land permanent until your next turn it can't attack or block, can't activate abilities, all that good stuff. So when you're getting it, you're usually ending the game that turn. Actually, I'd be interested to see the 17 lands data on that. Maybe we'll check it out after the show. But Defiant Strike, I was I was riding that Golem high at this point, right? I'm thinking, well, we got the one Golem pick 4. Maybe other people are going to be shipping us Golems. When you get a Golem deck and a bunch of Defiant Strikes and like show of confidence, that kind of thing, you start getting a really fun, aggressive start. But again, this was kind of angling us in a stranger direction, just a little bit off. I don't know. It probably was the pick, but Probation wouldn't have been a bad pickup either.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to consider the learned stuff you have, and right now we don't have very much. We have like Professor of Symbology, and I think that's it. So,
Yep.
So if we took the probation, that doesn't necessarily mean we ever get to play it. So I don't know. I kind of like Defiant Strike, but I guess the same could be said about the Defiant Strike. It's still just one card. But
yeah.
Next, we go to pick 6. We see a Plumb the Forbidden, Agonizing Remorse, Devastating Mastery, which I just don't like. That's the White Wrath Mastery spell. Another Expanded Anatomy, an Expel, and a Silver Quill Apprentice. And we ended up taking the Apprentice here. We did linger on the Expanded Anatomy and the Expel for a little bit of time, but the thought was we're low on creatures right now, we're low on Learn right now, and so the extra Anatomy is likely not going to get cast, and in fact, if everything stayed as it is now, we would only ever be able to cast one of them anyway, so we took the Silver Quill Apprentice.
Yep, I like how the Apprentice pairs with flyers. This thing sometimes gets stuck on the ground. It happens. Sometimes it attacks, sometimes it doesn't. But the ability to toss around that +1/+0, kind of wherever you need to, means that your maybe dorky flyer, your 2/2 flyer, can end up getting through the thing that was keeping your team back.
Magecraft also works well with the Golem, so, that's a little added bonus as well. Pick 7, we got past a Stonebinder's Familiar, woo. Essence Infusion, also woo. And a Spectre of the Fens. In our colors, there's a Quandrix Pledge Mage, which maybe is a signal. I don't know why there's a pick 7 Quandrix Pledge Mage going through this late in the draft, but
so sad.
Spectre of the Fens ended up being the pick here. Nothing really competing with it at this point.
Yep, just another flyer to add to the arsenal. And with a deck that has an aggressive enough start, activating that thing can actually win games.
Yeah, next and in hindsight, that's probably the better top end than the Witherbloom, to be honest. But
oh, I would rather activate Spectre over casting Witherbloom any day. In this kind of deck, I still want to cast Witherbloom in this format. Haven't done it yet. I think I've cast most of the other mythics, but I'll get around to her eventually. Next up, we've got pack 2, pick 8. There's an explosive welcome in this pack. All right. I mean, we're already speculating on one top-end splash. I'm not willing to commit to anything else. Biomathematician. The only things in this pack we really are interested in are either a Lorehold Pledge Mage or a Guiding Voice. I think it's close between these two. And given that we are a little light on Learn cards, I was really eyeing that Guiding Voice, man. But I think the Pledge Mage ended up being our pick here just because we wanted to have a few more creatures that we could, kind of toss around some of this extra power. We have ways to put counters. We have ways to increase, really just ways to increase power, right? Between the Defiant Strike and the Expanded Anatomy and the Silver Quill Apprentice, Lorehold Pledge Mage pairs perfectly well with those. So I think it was just a hair better than the Guiding Voice. Guiding Voice is a very strong card. Do not sleep on it. It costs 1 and it's a sorcery and it's white and it says 1/1 counter on it and it looks bad, but I promise it's worth it. We took the Pledge Mage here just because we kind of needed the bodies on the ground.
Yeah, the other thought was that the next pack is the one we opened, and we know that we should be seeing either a Guiding Voice or a Study Break. I believe it was this pack. We have another pack coming down the line at the very least, if it's not the next, where we're expecting to see one of those 2 Learn cards come back from that Reflective Golem pick, and so I guess, yeah, we have a few more packs before we see that, but we're expecting to get a little bit more Learn coming down because we know we're likely one of only 2 drafters that would care about those cards, and they were in the same pack. So
That's right. It was pick 4 that we saw that, so we got a few to go.
So pick 9 here, we see a couple of campuses, Prismari and Silver Quill to be exact. There's a Spectre of the Fens and a Spirit Summoning. Everything else is outside our colors, so we just scooped up the Spirit Summoning, not really looking to play 2 Spectre of the Fens in a deck like this.
Something I really like about 17 lands is that it shows the cards that are known to be missing. And from the known missing cards, it's obviously hard to say what kind of decks your opponents are building, but you can at least look at overall trends. For example, all the green cards are missing from this pack.
Yeah, basically everything that's missing is Quandrix, which is interesting.
In pick 10, we had some choices. There was a Revitalize and a Show of Confidence. This was starting to look like a potential Show of Confidence deck. If you go like Defiant Strike, Eliminate, Show of Confidence mid-combat, ooh, you're getting some value. And if there's a Reflective Golem involved in there, then, oh, you're popping off. Other stuff in here isn't really exciting. There's a Prismari Pledge Mage that came around pretty late, and an Illustrious Historian, but this is a Show of Confidence pickup for us.
Pick 11, there's a Beaming Defiance, not really a whole lot. The channel's still there, notably, but there's not a whole lot else that caught our attention. And into 12, so this was the pick with the Reflective Golem. We see that the Guiding Voice did get scooped up, but there is still the Study Break. So we did wield the Study Break. We expected to get one of those back at least, so happy to see the Study Break come back. And as far as aggression goes, I think the Study Break actually goes a little bit further than the Guiding Voice, because you can tap some stuff down on your turn, attack through. It does pretty well with that, and it's perfectly serviceable. Also, having the Learn there is what we really cared about here. Pick 13, we scoop up a Spiteful Squad. Not really super excited to play that, but perhaps it makes the cut. And then into 14 and 15, we see a Devastating Mastery and a Reject. Not really a whole lot going on there.
Oh, you know what I realized? In pick 14, there were two cards in that pack: Devastating Mastery and Elemental Masterpiece. You know what we should have done? We should have taken the Masterpiece and main decked it. So I could have discarded it to make a treasure so I could ramp out Beladros Witherbloom.
You know, I thought for a second you were going to say something insightful there, but you know what? I'm just going to ignore your gobbledygook and move on to pack 3, pick 1. In this pack, we see an Environmental Sciences, maybe something we care about. Our rare is the Prismari dual land, so not super exciting there. None of the uncommons are really what we want to be doing. There's a Defiant Strike, but kind of meh. And then we don't really have any other black-white cards besides Rise of Exodus. So we ended up not really seeing a whole lot in our colors in this pack, but we did get a card that is perfectly serviceable and one that we're actually pretty excited to play. Yep,
no complaints here, slamming Rise of Exodus. It is miles better than Detention Vortex and Ardent Dustspeaker, our other stuff. Sadly, there's a Rutha in this pack. Rutha is nuts, but not this time.
Well, we took the Elemental Masterpiece, so, we're just going to jam the Rutha as well. And
That's right. That way we can... No, I can't even work that in anyway. So in pick 2, we had a Shine Shadow Snarl, a Flunk Opt, another Reflective Golem, and then some other commons that we weren't particularly interested in. Now, this was a tough pick. Snarl, even though it's on color, is worse than either Flunk or Golem in this deck. And what ended up being the deciding factor here was we didn't have that many great pump spells for the Golem. We didn't have any of the ones that we were super excited about, and we didn't actually have that Guiding Voice that would have been so good if we had the second Golem. So we ended up taking Flunk just to shore up our removal. The only removal spells we had up to that point were Eliminate and Expel, and the Rise of Exodus that we had just picked up. So not super exciting. This deck's kind of looking to kill before it needs to do much else. So a second cheap removal spell like Flunk is a pretty good pickup here.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. The removal situation is actually more that we haven't seen too many of them. The one other removal spell we did see that we would have been excited about was Mage Hunter's Onslaught in pack 2, pick 2, but we took the Dramatic Finale over that because it had the higher ceiling.
Because Dramatic Finale.
Exactly. Into pick 3, we see a couple of good Witherbloom cards. Witherbloom Command, Blood Researcher, Brackish Trudge, Bayou Groff. There's also Frost Trickster, but all we have here are Silver Quill Campus, Pilgrim of the Ages, and Study Break, really, are the only cards we're super interested in. We ended up taking the Campus here just because it's good to have at least one Campus in your decks, and we didn't already have a Silver Quill Campus. I could see the argument for taking the Study Break here, but we also, our lesson plan doesn't have a whole lot going on. We have an Expanded Anatomy and a Spirit Summoning, and that's it. And we haven't seen any other summonings wheeling besides Spirit Summonings, so Campus it is.
Mm-hmm. I think the alternate reality version of this draft involves leaning a bit more into the learning lessons aspect, which I don't know, might have been the right thing to do from the start, but this all kind of snowballed from not taking that one guiding voice over the golem early on. Would we have a better deck if we'd done that? Maybe, but I like the campus here. It's kind of a kind of hedging our bets, right?
Sure. And then into pack 3, pick 4, we see a Lorehold Pledge Mage, Leech Fanatic, Unwilling Ingredient, another Silver Quill Campus, and Expanded Anatomy, which is what we ended up taking, and happy to scoop that up. Not really close, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. The ability to, like, opponents end step, study break their 2 creatures, grab an Expanded Anatomy, and then they look at their life total and they're like, oh, I'm at 7, am I just dead? You forgot to mention the rare in this pack, though.
I'm sorry, there's a rare in this pack?
What, are you not interested in Strixhaven Stadium? Not down to play a little bit of Quidditch?
Look, I have lost to the card. I'm not going to say that it doesn't win games, but I don't think we're in the deck to play it.
Yeah, I'm still not entirely sure what deck wants this. It's like every, I don't know, a deck that can make exactly 10 pests. I'm not.
I actually
Every
I lost to it in against a Lorehold deck, but it was one of the ones who went like Clever Lumimancer into Stonebinder's Familiar or something stupid, into like a 3-drop, into pump. What do you like? Come at me, bro. You know, and then it's like you're taking so much damage that you can't actually deal with the stadium. And then they were able to stop me from attacking back with study breaks and things like that, so it just snowballed.
So what you were saying was they were going to win anyway, and they just have to have a stadium on board.
Basically.
All right. Well, next pick, this is pick 5. We have some blue cards coming around: a Kelpie Guide, Strategic Planning, Prismari Pledge Mage. As for us, the Pillar Drop Rescuer was kind of the only thing we're interested in. Black cards in the pack are Crushing Disappointment and Promising Dusk Mage. At this point, we're pretty solidly in Silver Quill. There's an Enthusiastic Study in this pack, and I love Enthusiastic Study, especially with the Reflective Golem. But I'm not looking to add a color here. We just took the Pillar Drop Rescuer and weren't particularly happy about it.
Adds into the Flyers theme, though, and I think that's the way that Silver Quill aggro really wants to do its thing. It's less of a get you dead in 4 turns deck and more of a I'm going to just gum up the air as opposed to the ground, and you're going to have to figure out a way to deal with that because there aren't a lot of ways to deal with Flyers in this format.
Yeah, I would have taken an Owlin Shield Mage over pretty much half the cards we've seen in the last like pack and a half. Just like this deck really wants like 1 or 2 more Owlin Shield Mages and then 1 or 2 more solid aggressive cards. In pack 3, pick 6, at this point we're kind of on rails. We've got most of our deck together. There was an Unwilling Ingredient, a Professor's Warning, and a Gift of Estates, which we eyed for a little bit. 2 mana, draw 3 planes. I mean, this isn't the worst thing in the world, but the fact that it only works if an opponent controls more lands than you, sometimes you just won't get to do anything with this. And also, our deck would rather be playing creatures on the early turns anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the vector theory aspect of this. Gift of Estates is very much in the other direction. It's a card that wants to help you ramp when you're behind, and you don't care about ramping when you're behind on lands in this deck. You just want to play more of your stuff.
Mm-hmm. We ended up taking the Professor's Warning because it's a fine combat trick. It pairs decently well with the fact that we're already putting counters on some of our creatures. So we want to make sure those creatures stay alive so they can actually, kill the opponent. It also pairs well with the Reflective Golem. Indeed.
On to pick 7. We took a Witherbloom Campus off of the potential to splash. Now, the only other cards in the pack, and again, this was a situation where it was pretty easy to scoop this up because we're not giving anything up. We see the Quandrix, Vine Glimmer Snarl, the Quandrix rare dual land. There's a Professor's Warning and a Spiteful Squad, and that's it. So grab the Witherbloom Campus. Again, probably not going to play it at this point, and our deck is shaping up to be aggressive enough that I think we don't really want Witherbloom anyway, but still worth taking. Into pick 8, we see Reduce the Memory, Pillar Drop Rescuer, Spectre Defends, another Spirit Summoning, which maybe would have been worth taking here, but with double Expanded Anatomy and not too much learning going on, we ended up taking a Make Your Mark.
I love Make Your Mark. I think this is a really, really cool card. It's a very unique design, and our opponent is already going to be trying to trade off with us. This just pairs well. If one fun little thing that you can do, you can put Make Your Mark on your opponent's stuff. So if I'm about to say eliminate my opponent's creature, you can make your market. Sometimes you can even use it in like a goofy way in combat, where sometimes you'll just end up targeting your opponent's thing to kind of like, if like their creature is already going to die and you suspect they have a specific pump spell, and you can use it in a strange way such that you don't get blown out as much. I don't know. It's a really interestingly designed card. So often I've just found it to be a 1 mana 3/2. That's just how it works.
Yeah.
A 1 mana 3/2 flash can only be played during combat.
Yeah, basically. On to pick 9, we see a Spectre of the Fens and a Spiteful Squad. We ended up taking the Spectre here. Again, trying to lean into that flying thing. We don't really care about the Spiteful Squad too much. We already have one, and we're probably not playing either of these cards here, but, you know, kind of just rounding out our deck. Into pick 10, we picked up a Pilgrim of the Ages, which may be something we want. Other options were Star Pupil and Stonerise Spirit. Probably could have gone with the Stonerise Spirit here just to keep the flyers going and also give the ability to jump something later in the game, but Pilgrim's fine, and it does help get you some of those lands if need be. It also does that whole pivot at the end when you're up against like a longer game deck, as it comes back quite easily.
In pick 11, we found an Essence Infusion, another Star Pupil, Brackish Trudge Wield. I don't know, man. Honor Troll and Brackish Trudge, the pair of lowly, uncommon 3-drops. I love them both. I want them to be happy. I don't think they're great though. The Trudge can do work in a long game if you're grinding out against like the mirror match, but we're never getting it back here. We don't have that many ways to gain life at all. We took the Essence Infusion here. Sometimes if you go turn 1 Unwilling Ingredient, turn 2 Essence Infusion, it could actually give your opponent a real headache.
Into pick 12, we picked up another Silverquill Campus over nothing. And into 13, a Promising Dusk Mage. And then we rounded out the rest of pack 3 with a couple of cards that aren't going to make the cut. A Thrilling Discovery as well as a Spiteful Squad. So we ended up with a pretty solid little Silverquill deck here, splashing for Witherbloom.
That's the question. Are we splashing though?
No, I don't think so. I actually don't think that it got there. I was speculating on the potential for our deck to not get very aggressive here, and it ended up getting there. Like it's mostly there, I would say. I think you know, it's probably just better off like casting Rise of Exodus as your top end, or using the Spectre of the Fens as I mentioned before, and just beating down in the air. Even though you're not going to be doing it as quickly as, say, a dedicated Lorehold aggro deck with Lumimancers and such, you're still going to be able to get through in the air, and Combat Professor is going to enable a lot of weird shenanigans with your flyers as well, and giving other things vigilance and such. So I think probably got there. Belladros ended up not being the flyer we needed or wanted.
Yep. Sorry, Belladros, not this time. The question is, how do we build this? I mean, I'm immediately going to cut the 2 Spiteful Squads. I just don't like them very much. I think they're pretty bad, especially because they're not at all what this type of deck is going to do. They sometimes can fit into like the counters thing, and I suppose they're cute with Dramatic Finale, given that they're the kind of creature you want to trade off. Yeah. I'd like them more in Best of 3, where you get to sideboard them in against like big Quandrix Fractals or something. But in this case, they don't seem to fit the go over the top of your opponent's stuff with flyers game plan very well.
Yeah, I also am not a huge fan of the Pillar Drop Rescuers. We have a couple of decent cards we can get back with them, mostly like a couple of 3-drops, but we don't have that many 2-drop creatures, and most of them aren't very good. We could get back the Professor Symbology and the Silverquill Apprentice, as well as the Lorehold Pledge Mage, Reflective Golem, Shadewing Laureate. So we do have a couple of good targets with it. Maybe we cut one of them. But yeah, Spiteful Squads seem like they could be cut. Maybe one of the Spectres could be cut. I don't really like Eager First Year that much, even though it is a 2-drop. This deck just, maybe it'll get there. I'm not really sure. I think we have better things to do. I think this deck does better relying on the Flyers game plan than it does relying on just general aggression.
Yeah, I agree. I'm in to cut one of the Pillar Drop Rescuers. Having multiples is a little bit clunky, I suppose. And maybe cutting a Spectre. Now, we have this Dramatic Finale. This card wins games. We don't actually have many ways of making like other tokens. We don't have a single way of making any Inklings. We just didn't see a single way to make an Inkling this draft, did we?
Finale is the only way. Yeah.
Sad. But sometimes that's just how the packs crack, right? I like the number of 2-drops we have. I want to take a look at what can attack between like turns 2 and 3. So we have an unwilling ingredient. We have a eager first year, professor of symbology, arrogant poet, silver quill apprentice. We only have 5 things that come down before turn 3. I don't know if I want to cut any of them.
Yeah, I mean, I could see cutting that first essence infusion. That's probably where you might want to start. That doesn't seem to be the best, and we do have a lot of 2-drops. I don't think that's a problem for a deck like this, but we also have a heavy top end, so we cut Belladros, we cut maybe one of the Pillar Drop Rescuers, cut the Spiteful Squads, cut a Spectre, cut an Infusion, and then that puts us at what? How many cuts does that get us?
I need 2 cuts right now here. Think so yeah, hold on. You got all that stuff, if I counted correctly. Yeah, I like all that stuff. It's tough. I think we need 2 more cuts. I like the top end: Rise of Exodus, Pillar Drop, Closing Statement, Owlin Shield Mage, Combat Professor, Spectre Defends, Dramatic Finale. That's a nice top end kind of looking thing. Are we playing? We're not playing the. Is this a? No, I don't want to do. I don't think I want to go down to 16 lands here. I think there's enough reason to hit land 5 with the Rescuers and the
Rise
Shield
of
Mage and
Exodus
Rise
and
of
such.
Exodus. Yeah, probably just man. Could it be the Golem? Oh no, but Golem
Defiant
can pop
Strike,
off.
perhaps.
Yeah, I think Defiant Strike is good, specifically with Golem and Lorehold Pledge Mage. I guess it's one of our worst combat tricks, and it's not, it's not great. I guess it's not doing too much for us. Between that, Professor's Warning, and Make Your Mark, 3 1-drop combat tricks. We should probably cut one of these, right?
Yeah, I guess the question is, do you care more about keeping your stuff alive or just getting them through with value? Because, I mean, everything's good with Reflective Golem. I think it goes without saying. But
Yeah.
I think the other 2 potentially do more for us than the Professor's Warning does. Like, Defiant Strike at least replaces itself, so it's a way to get an extra card in your hand. The +1/+0 is not really something we care about, so I honestly think that it's probably the least effective of them. Whereas Professor's Warning at least lets us keep something alive if need be. Otherwise, we can just do the thing, like put the counters on things. But it's tough because I like that draw a card phrase. I just don't think Defiant Strike's that great of a card. Again, does work very well with the Golem, but so does Professor's Warning.
I don't think it's nuts to cut Expel.
I think am nervous about it because our removal suite is so awful. I mean, where you don't really care about the ground, but if they do happen to plant a flyer, we're going to care about that a lot.
If they happen to plant a flyer, though, under what case is it ever attacking us?
That's fair, but a lot of the flyers in our deck aren't. I mean, I guess Spectre's probably the best and Combat Professor, best situated flyers because there are a lot of X2 flyers in this format. I'm not worried about the attacking. I'm worried about stopping us from attacking. I guess they do need to tap in the first place, so yeah, there's that.
So I just don't think Expel fits this game plan very much.
But Study Break and Expel go well together.
Oh, that's true. That is a good little interaction. I don't know. That is just a 2-card interaction, though. I don't know if that's really worth it. Because at that point, if we're Study Breaking, we're probably untapping and casting Expanded Anatomy or a Spirit Summoning, right? At that point, I just don't think we care about expelling their creature unless it's like dire straits, and by that point, we probably already lost.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
So I count 41 cards now. I'm looking at this real quick.
Is that with or without the Expel?
That's after cutting the Expel, so then we need 1 more cut.
I'm tempted to just say it should be Defiant Strike or Eager First Year. I know you don't want to cut another creature, but Eager First Year is a 2-drop we really don't care that much about.
It is pretty bad. Is it nuts to cut 1 land? Defiant Strike cycles.
Probably not. I don't know. I mean, I'm just nervous about the Exodus and hitting all those 5-drops, but I guess Closing Statement's not really a 5-drop, and Owlin Shield Mage is the only one we super care about.
And this is a pretty aggressive deck. There's also a Pilgrim of the Ages, which can go and get a land to guarantee the land drop.
That's true.
I think
maybe
it's
16's
probably
correct.
Yeah, I think I'm okay cutting planes from this deck. We do have two campuses, so we have. Oh, that's true. Actually, that makes me feel much more comfortable with this. We have 10 white sources and 9 black sources in this deck. That
Well, the
seems
campuses can be
pretty
awkward
great.
too because we don't really want to tap out on 2 or 3 for them. Like we don't really want the ETB tapped land on 2 or 3, or even 4 or 5, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think having 2 is fine though. Like we only have 1/1 drop, so just having them in
Sure.
our opening hand would just be pretty good. I think we could probably cut a planes and be pretty happy, right?
Yeah, seems reasonable.
Yeah, I think this actually is. Man, poor Belladro sitting in the sideboard. I hate to see you there, buddy, but imagine if we tried to fit this thing in the main deck. Then our land situation and figuring out what we're cutting here would just be even messier, right?
For
So
sure. Yeah, no,
this
I
is
definitely think it didn't get there, but worth speculating on.
So I will play out games with this deck, and I guess let the Discord know how I did. I'm not going to spoil or anything. You'll find out the day of the podcast release how I did with this deck. Um, Hopefully not an 0-3. This deck looks like it can win some games. Dramatic Finale is a very, very strong Magic card.
Definitely. Well, as Ben mentioned, he's going to be showing the record for this in the Discord. If you're not in the Discord, go ahead and jump into that. The link to it is in the episode description as well as on our Twitter page. And again, if you're interested in supporting the show directly, you can do so at Patreon. Check out patreon.com/draftchaffpod for all the details on that. Our next goal there on the Patreon, by the way, I mentioned that we hit our first one. Our next goal will open up the recording channel here so you can listen in as we record live. So if that's something you're interested in, maybe help reach that goal. If you want to reach out to us on social media, you can do so by finding me at Rannick Alfredian on Twitter. You can find Ben at BetaFish1 and the podcast at DraftChaffPod. You can also email us at draftchaffpod@gmail.com or check out the YouTube channel, like I mentioned at the beginning. The link to that is also in the episode description. Or just search for Draft Chaff. We're pretty much the first thing that shows up. That's it for us. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
See ya. So before we go, there was a trend going around on Magic Twitter this last week, and I thought we should address it. The rate yourself honestly as a Magic player trend. Did you see this?
I did, yeah. I wondered if you were going to mention this, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it might be worth mentioning. So it requires you to rate yourself as a deck builder, deck selector, drafter, opponent's hand reader, gameplay decision maker, work ethic wise, and mental game wise. That's a lot of stuff that I just kind of read off at once, but I figure I may as well try to give myself some honest ratings. Deck builder. I net deck standard decks, so let's just skip that one. Deck selector.
Well, hold on. You net deck standard decks, but every other format you tend to do yourself, and you're quite good at deck building.
Okay, fair. So deck building. I don't know. Sometimes I like throwing in an odd like curveball standard deck. What am I? I'm probably like a 7 out of 10 for a deck builder.
Yeah, that's about where I had you. Yeah.
Yeah. There is that one standard deck, my brainchild from years past, the Green White Seasons past, that would like go to toe with like Mardu Super Friends at FNM and just like wipe the floor with it. I mean, I can build a deck that's standard playable, I suppose.
Yeah, I'd put you somewhere around a 6 or 7.
How about you?
I am not a good deck builder. I also don't generally like it. I get kind of bogged down outside of Commander. I get bogged down by the plethora of choices that are available, and then just kind of get overwhelmed with decision paralysis and just stop trying. So I'd put myself at probably like a 4. Like I can build decks if I'm forced to. If you hold a gun to my head, I can do it. I've built enough limited decks to know like what makes a deck work, and I know how to build control decks. But if you had me build a mid-range deck and randomly with like a bunch of cards in standard, I'd probably not build an optimal list or anything like that. So yeah, 4, maybe 5.
You know what we should mention? I think it's also the standard environment that's had an effect on this. In current standard, I don't enjoy building decks either because what is there to build?
That's
Like
fair.
half the cards that I want to build with just get bone crushed on turn 2, and then it's like, all right, well,
Yeah.
I guess we tried. And rating myself as a like kitchen table Magic deck builder, I'm at 11. I'm just
Yeah,
confident
yeah,
in that.
yeah.
That's why we have the Patreon bonus of like the I build you a deck based on your favorite draft chaff. I love doing that, and I have made tens of kitchen table decks and just given them to friends or that kind of thing. So that I'm confident in. How about deck selector? So picking what you're going to play in like a tournament or a meta.
Yeah, that's tough for me to answer because I haven't done enough of this. Like, I don't play very many constructed tournaments. We did the one tournament we played that was constructed that was like decent stakes was a GP, and we actually selected a pretty solid deck for the environment. We just ended up washing out because we didn't face any of the decks that we built the deck to beat.
We built that deck though. Like
we did.
we should mention like we get some deck building cred from that alone, I think.
If we made day 2 or something, I would say we did, but
Okay,
we didn't. But that said, I'd say probably like again middle of the road for me, like a 5 or 6 on deck selection. Like I think I'm good enough, but I also don't pay enough attention to the meta in general to know what's good or what's bad. It doesn't take a whole lot, I think, to pick up on that, and maybe that catches into the work ethic thing. But yeah, probably 5 or 6.
I would put myself at like a 2 or a 3 because I have a fatal flaw, an Achilles heel. I'm very well aware of what the best decks are. I keep up to date on the meta at all times. I've got like bookmarks for all the top meta pages, and I even have a plugin that shows the top meta decks in Standard when I first get an arena. I just choose not to play them. I just try to angle, and I try to play stuff that I think might beat the best decks. Or like when Jund was the best deck in Historic for like a year, I just refused to play Jund. I just didn't want to play Jund Sack. I just didn't like playing it. It was the best deck. I would have performed better at my qualifier weekends if I'd been playing Jund. I just chose not to.
Hey, that's fair.
Next up is drafting. Oh man, what are we? Both 10s, right?
I would like to say I'm a 10, but I know I'm not. Like, I'm not even close. And I think I saw, like, some of the people I deemed to be, like, pretty solid or even some of the best drafters didn't even give themselves 10s. So I don't know if that's, like, you're being hard on yourself or what, but I don't know. I'd probably put myself at, like, in the actual draft portion of drafting, I would probably put myself at, like, a 7.
I think people that tend to be good at something, the better you are at something, the harsher you are on yourself in regards to that thing because you're more aware of other people doing it. You're more aware of the technical skills required for it. So I think it'd be easy to assume that some like top level drafters would just give themselves 10s and move on. But I think they're very well aware that they have like that they're not the best. They know the mistakes they make very easily. So I'm obviously a 10.
Naturally.
No, I would give myself probably closer to like an 8. I do think I'm a good drafter. I have a lot of practice, and it's my favorite thing to do in Magic. So I would say probably like a 10.
Naturally.
Next up is opponent's hand reading.
I feel like I'm generally decent at this. I mean, being a control mage tends to help with that kind of thing. You learn to read people's hands. I still find myself getting like a little spike of like, oh yes, I got there when I'm like, they have this and then they have that. So I wouldn't. I don't. Again, I don't think I'm a 10 or even close to a 10 in any of these categories. But I'd probably put myself at like a 7 or 8 on opponent's hand reading. I think it's generally relatively easy to do that. And so I would assume that means I'm decent at it. Like, I don't think it's actually a super easy skill, but.
I would say constructed, I'm probably like a 6. I tend to know what's in the format, but I find myself getting got by things decently often. Just because I don't put as much time or effort into constructed. In limited, at the beginning of a format, I'm probably like a 4. But by the end of the format, I would say I'm a solid 10. Like by the end of the format, I have memorized every single combat trick, and I know exactly every card they could have at a given time. It's become harder recently now that Magic has printed more one-drop spells that are good. Because now when an opponent leaves up 2 mana, it just like doubles or potentially even more the number of things they could have or the combinations of things sometimes. Like Defiant Strike into Make Your Mark, like what are they going to do? But I would say by the end of the format, I'm pretty confident in my ability to say every single card my opponent could have.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I kind of took an aggregate like average of all the different situations together, but yeah, that makes sense.
Next up is gameplay decision making.
Again, I'd say I'm somewhere just above middle of the road. I think probably a 6 or 7 on decision making. I play control magic as like for fun. So like that tends to involve a lot more decision making than like just a generic play my cards and beat you down type of deck. Not to say that those don't have decision points, but I think control decks tend to have more.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, probably a 7 or 8, 6 maybe. I don't know, somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm. My true love is mid-range. Like, if you give me a good mid-range deck in a format, give me like a Siege Rhino deck and tell me it's good in the format, and I'll just have a blast. Siege Rhino requires 0 thought to play. Did you build your mana base correctly? Yes? Okay, then you can play Siege Rhino on turn 4. And then maybe you can flicker it on turn 5 or something. So I would say I tend towards decks that don't require as many decision points. Some people say that like burn or aggro is too easy because it has fewer decision points. I disagree. I actually think it's something like a parabolic shape from like aggressive decks, then mid-range decks, then control decks. I think aggressive decks and control decks have the most decision points because you're often asking yourself, when am I trading off? When am I, like ramming one of my 2/2s into a 3/3 just to get in 4 extra points of damage because I know that's my only out to win the game.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think aggro and burn decks actually have a lot of decision points that are so niche that a lot of players miss them, but they're there nonetheless.
And it's easy to see why people say that, right? When your opponent is playing mono red and they go like turn 1 Fervent Champion, turn 2 Robber of the Rich, turn 3 Anax, it looks like they just went 1, 2, 3 and there was no thought involved. But from playing a lot of red and white, like monocolor aggressive decks, the number of decision points that go into that level of fluidity playing, like I have tested every single combination of which 1-drop do I play first, and then which one am I looking to potentially double spell with on turn 2. Like I have that down to a science for historic mono white, for example, and that's just a product of me having played the deck so many times. So I would say my decision making for certain decks is better than others. Probably to give myself like an average overall score, probably like a 6 or a 7. Next up, we've got work ethic. What's our work ethic like?
Depends. In limited, probably like a 7, 8, somewhere around there. For constructed, probably like a 3 or 4. I don't know. I think in general, like it's pretty decent. When we play events that matter, we tend to care about figuring out what should I be doing. Even if you're not playing the best deck in the format, there's still an amount of what decks do I need to beat, and how do I do that, and that kind of stuff. And I mean, we do run a podcast on how to be better at limited, and well, I don't even know if that's actually a fair thing to say. We run a podcast about limited, so I mean, that's something, right? We've got to make show notes, and we totally don't only write the show notes the day of the episode. That's never a thing that happens.
Okay, I was actually going to say, well, first of all, I agree. We have a podcast about limited, and if incidentally some people get better because they listen to it, that's on them, I guess.
Exactly.
I would say like the work ethic between us, as far as like our podcast goes, we average at like I'd say a 7 or 8. We put a lot of time and effort into this, which
we definitely
do. Now, if it's the day before recording and our show notes still have a lot of blanks in them, our work ethic goes up to an 11 because we get that stuff done.
That's true. We haven't missed an episode yet.
No, and I don't think we will. Last but not least, we have mental game. I guess this is, I don't know, how is this different than like gameplay decision making? Is this like cracking under pressure or something like that? Is this like bluffing
Maybe.
and that kind of
more
thing?
Of a stamina thing? I'm not sure. I actually don't know the answer to that question. I guess I'd put myself at something similar as far as the decision making goes. Like my mental game, I think, is pretty strong. It's like the main reason I play Magic in the first place is because it's mentally stimulating, and I'm a big fan of strategy games in general, and strategy in general outside of games necessarily. So I'd probably put myself at like a 7 or 8 there as well. There's definitely a lot to learn there. I mean, I don't think you ever are done with that kind of thing, but
yeah, that's true. probably same idea, just because I'm also a little unsure. But now to focus in on bluffing, I'm gonna put myself as like a solid 8 on the bluffing scale, maybe even a 9. I will if we're playing limited, I will attack a 2/2 into a 3/3 when there's like exactly one thing I could have, and it's like an uncommon. Like I'll do it every time, unless we had a whole show about this. Go back
We
and
did.
watch the bluffing show if you need some insight on this. But people should bluff more often, and your opponents do not bluff as often as they should be. So typically, when your opponents attack, they will have it, unless you're playing against me, in which case I don't have it. But you should let me through anyway.